I want to make one announcement. The WPT is doing a gigantic free roll, a $5 million free roll at the Wynn on December 13th during the WPT Championship. All you have to do to get into the entry and the drawing that I have with these free seats is head over to ClubWPTGOLD.com and sign up using the code BART. I'm going to be at this event. It's going to be amazing. Each seat is worth at least $2,500. And they're also giving away a bunch of 10K WPT championship seats as well. Hello, Brandon. You are up first, sir.
Hey Bart, how's it going?
Hey, Brandon. Are you playing this one from, is it Encore Boston Harbor?
Yep, right in our backyard.
Encore Boston Harbor, which I probably will not actually get to go there this week. I might actually play on Sunday of this week. Some things about Thanksgiving games are actually really good. The day after Friday, Thanksgiving games are really good. But I actually got word from Ryan Feldman that I'm going to be doing commentary remotely for this special week that they're doing in Cyprus. Hustler Casino Live's doing a week in Cyprus, and they're all doing remote commentary. So I'm actually going to be doing that on Friday, the day after Thanksgiving, next week. So that will be interesting. I've always wanted to try to do remote commentary. So are you playing 2-5, Brandon?
Yep, this is the 2-5. We got the $10 under the gun straddle on.
So 2-5, Encore Boston Harbor. You got the $10 straddle, which is always good. What time of day was this at?
This was also a Sunday game, probably like late afternoon, like 3 or 4 o'clock.
Okay. And how deep are you?
I am the effective stack here with 1360.
All right, 1360. Yeah, it's always great to be able to play in games where you get a straddle going, like at 2-5. I mean, it can deal, and I did a podcast a few weeks ago dealing with sort of shallower. I did a podcast because we were playing 5-10-20 with a 2K buy-in, and then sometimes it was going to 40, and there were some short stack type of things. It's interesting to play kind of a higher stakes 100 BB game when it's live. When you deal with very large open sizes, it's actually much shallower than sort of what it is on paper. Although even at 2-5 when we play straddles, it seems like still people just like raised it to 30 as the standard open size. So 1360 effective, okay?
Yep. So the preflop action, we got a limp from under the gun +2. We got a hijack limp, the small blind limps, and I wake up with 2 black kings in the big blind.
In the middle blind.
Yep, and I raise to 75.
So hero with king of clubs, king of spades in the big blind. 3 people have limped in, including the small blind. And again, it's $10. So you make it 75.
Do you think that's on the smaller side?
No, actually, I was kind of thinking it was more on the larger side. Like if there were 3 people that limped in 5-10, if I'm opening usually to 35, 45, 55, 65, I mean, you're out of position. I'm sure it's okay. It's just, you might not need to make it that large depending on what the stack sizes are of some of the other people. Like if there were some shorter stacks in there, 500-600, something like that, I wouldn't want to actually drive them out as much. I'd kind of wanted them to get married to top pair, but it's, I think it's fine. So you go to 75, okay?
Yep, and we just get 1 call from the hijack.
All right, so the hijack calls only, and that was a guy that was the second limper, so he over limped, and he calls, and he's 1360, obviously with you, so the pot is what, like 170-ish, something like that?
It's 197, and with our terrible rake, it's
Okay.
185.
Oh, because of the $10. All right, 185. Okay, so your heads up with black kings from the big blind out of position. Okay.
Yep. So the flop, it's Queen of Hearts, 9 of Spades, 4 diamonds.
Queen of Hearts, 9 of spades, 4 of diamonds. Okay.
Yep. And on these neutral board textures, at a position as the original aggressor, I like mixing in between, range betting, maybe like third pot, and also checking. I decided to check this one. Just wanted to put this more in my stronger range when I do end up with the ace king, ace jacks, and I also don't think this is a board that should hit the limp calling range all that often. So I check, and the villain bets 80.
So hero checks. Let's talk about that here for a second. So obviously you can sometimes check from out of position. And a lot of times, if it's multi-way, the theory will tell you that you're supposed to check a lot because of the strong flat calling ranges. Of course, this guy was a second limper, and he called a raise, just like limp called, like as the second limper. Again, I mean, I can talk about this to death. Maybe it's a stylistic thing. The lower stakes that I play, the more often that I'm not checking post flop, I can understand the merits of it. And where this would come into play is if you're in a player pool that likes a stab a lot, where you think that there's actually more value in checking to have them stab as opposed to betting for value and having them call with worse. And just in this particular setup, I mean, I've been playing this game probably bits and pieces of it for at least a year and a half to 2 years. I just don't see that setup. So, if you want to mix it up and stuff with some regs that you're playing constantly, fine. It's not wrong, but and it's not necessarily right. It's just kind of a stylistic thing. I mean, that's kind of my approach to this type of situation. But okay, so you check and the hijack bet's 85. Is that what you said?
80, and
80.
then, yeah, I call. Normally, I think this is a type of hand that I would wanna take 3 streets with and just bet, bet, bet. But, I've been playing in the Boston Encore for about a year now, and I actually haven't seen this particular play before. He sat down at our table with only 500 and, like, he thought, like, he was sitting at a 1-3 game, but just decided to stay. So I know he's a very recreational player that, I've gotten into a couple of hands with him where he was showing down bluffs on the river very proudly, so I know he's very capable of kinda overstabbing, so I kinda thought this was a decent candidate to let him stab with horse or even just air.
Yeah, I mean, I understand what you're saying, but if he's a guy who typically plays 1-3, that's sort of if I were to sort of put a default profile into that, he would kind of stab less often. The lower stakes that you play, or the lower stakes typically that you would say competition that you would play against, the more I would think that they're just sort of playing off the board and their own hand, and they're going to put you in far easier spots where they're actually not going to be stabbing anywhere near enough. Like a guy might just give up if he has. I'm trying to think. I mean, any type of sort of Broadway-ish type of hand here is basically going to flop some sort of straight draw. But he might not start a bet with like ace three of spades or something like that. Whatever is supposed to be bet, 6-7 of spades, maybe something three to a straight and a flush, 5-6 of spades, something like that. It's queen 9-4, right? So if you had 5-6 of spades, maybe. People who know what's going on are starting to bet more often. I mean, that's just my take on the typical type of opponent. So the lower stakes, if he's a typical 1-player, 3-player, I would think that I'd actually just want to bet more off. Now, did you ever consider check raising? We've talked about that before a little bit too.
Sorta. I think he's just stabbing a lot with nothing or, like, those draws, as you said, and I was considering raising to something small, maybe, like, 200 or 220, just to kinda see where I was at, but
To see where you're at now, you don't want to do it to see where you're at. It would be more of you unblock top pair and you think he's going to bet and call with a queen. Now, the counter to that is that it's kind of a disaster if you were to bet and get called by like a 9 or pocket 8s or pocket 7s, and then you just have those hands bet and fold to a check raise. That's kind of like I like the betting line a little bit more than that. The other thing too to take into account if you're going to play this line this way is that, unless you're planning on doing something kind of unorthodox, usually you're just going to continue to give him the lead. So I always wonder, like, okay, let's say the turn's like a brick and you check and he bets like 125, like on the turn. Are you just going to check call and then check the river and like let queen jack check behind? That's my biggest sort of objection to this line in those cases. And sometimes you can sort of suss out the opponent's hand strength by his bet sizing on turn. I mean, you might not get a blank on turn. I don't even know what's coming on the turn, but that's where it gets a little strange for me. If you sort of if you check the turn and get like kind of a small bet size and you call and then it just goes check, check at the end.
yeah. Yeah, I definitely think I'm missing on a potential value from not betting myself or even considering a check raise on the flop. No, I like your thought
All
process.
right. So what's the turn here? Queen 9-4 rainbow hero with black kings. Okay.
The turn card is the 7 of diamonds.
All right. I mean, I would say that's a blank. I mean, it's a blank in the sense that it's not gonna, it doesn't bring any of the straights in, and it's also another, it's not an over card to second pair here too. So there's something to be said about that. Now, I'm not saying that a guy is gonna If he's got like 9-10 suited and he decides to bet because he puts you on ace king, he might bet again here on the turn. This is where it is kind of interesting though, because it is a blank and it's an undercard to second pair if you check to him, which I assume you're going to do, like what kind of sizing he's going to use.
Yeah, I do decide to check. I don't know if I have too many leads on this card per se. I think I mostly want to let him continue, but
It's very, very strange to play a hand pre-flop like this and then check call and then lead the turn. I mean, that's why I said like it would be very strange to do that. So,
yep.
I mean, I think it's just because I mean you're trying to make your hand look kind of weak by check calling, right? So, all right, so 7 of diamonds comes, puts a backdoor diamond draw out there. Queen of hearts, 9 of spades, 4 of diamonds turns to 7 of diamonds. Okay, you check.
Yep. And he now bets 250.
All right, so now hijack bets 250. So Brandon, what do you think is the difference between him betting like 250 and like 125 here on the turn in terms of what you think his range is?
I think 250 probably leans more towards draws. I mean, effectively, it's about two-thirds size pot. If he had bet smaller, I would actually put him more on like the weak, queens or even just some 9x combos that want to try and get to a river cheaply. So I think I know effectively it's not that big of a bet, just only two-thirds size of the pot. But I think he's actually trying to slightly polarize a little bit.
I mean, it's about 2/3 the size of the pot. I wouldn't say that it's all draws, but what I would say is that I would start to think that this probably isn't anything but a queen or better for value. So to answer my question, I would say if he bets 250, it's going to be a queen plus for value, as opposed to 125, where you still might have a fair amount of sort of medium protection bets that are just kind of betting against ace king. And the way that you've played this hand, it's a little bit handcuffing because I had said, well, what are you going to do if he bets 125 on a brick and you're going to just check call and then it goes check, check. Here, it's like you might just check call and it still might go check, check. And what ended up happening is by checking the flop, you get 80 in value and then you get 250 and then it just goes check, check. But if you actually kept the lead the whole time, you would have ended up getting more value. But I think now, as played to the 250, there's probably not much that you can do besides just call here. I think against this type of sizing, if you start thinking about like some sort of turn one pair check raise, you might start thinking maybe that it might be a little bit of an overplay.
Yeah, I didn't really see much value in either, raising small or even really jamming because I think for the most part I'm just folding out his worst hands. So I do end up just calling.
Some people are saying fold the turn. What?
No way, I'm doing that. I might as well just go home if I'm folding that turn.
Yeah, yeah. By the way, this is not a 3-bet pot. Remember, it's limp limp in a straddle pot. Raise it out of the big blind. Call. Second limp call. That's the other thing too. It's not even like one of these ones where it's like, okay, it's a 3-bet pot. Like the guy opened, I 3-bet. I'm protecting my stack against queens and nines. It's a limped pot, So that even more so that leans towards the flop bet. All right, so hijack bets 250. Hero calls, and now the pot is 845. So what is your plan here on the river? Are you checking all rivers here?
No, I definitely don't think I'm checking all rivers. I think I can lead on certain cards, even more blanks, just leading small and maybe hopefully inducing him to do something with his draws or just, sort of naming my own price with a weak queen.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's an interesting. I mean, the river, depending on what it is definitely kind of weird to play. Let's say it's a brick, like an offsuit deuce. You could lead block, I guess, 300-400, something like that. You gotta look at stat. I mean, you guys. So you raised it to 74, 55, 400. You only have 1,000 left, so you get about a little over a pot size bet left. So if you go like 350 at the end, and somehow he were to jam, the pot would be like 22, 650 for you to call. Like if the river's a deuce, and I don't know if you just give him having a value hand. Most people aren't going to like raise bluff the river. I'm just more concerned that it just goes check check at the end if you don't take. But at the same time, like when you block the river, it's like what were you hanging around with the whole time? Anyways, what is the river? Because we'll see what happens here.
Yep, and the river is the 4 of hearts.
4 of hearts. That's a pretty big brick. Again, queen of hearts, nine of spades, four of diamonds, turns the seven of diamonds, rivers the four of hearts. It's a pretty big brick. And also, if you think this guy is going to raise preflop with pocket queens and pocket nines, it literally now like blocks 2/3 of what the thick value was, right, on the flop. And even more so because now you're beating a queen nine suited. So if he had queen nine suited and pocket fours here, because he raises all pocket queens and pocket nines off, now there's only one combo of thick value that was on the flop, which is pocket fours. You're beating queen nine, and now it goes from 3 sets down to 1. So that's a pretty good card for you. And the other thing too, just moving back to the turn in terms of hand rating, once in a while, the villain slivers here and backs into a 4 that he was betting off on the flop. But again, that's not consistent with this turn bet sizing of 250. Like it would be, he would probably have more 4x in his range if the turn bet might have been like 125 or got checked back. But once he bets 250 on the turn, I just don't buy it. So I mean, that's a really good card for you. Like, what are you losing to?
Exactly, and actually, before the river came out, I was thinking in my head, like, I want an offsuit four because obviously he only has one combo that I'm also beating now his 9 sevens that decided to take a stab at the flop. And I was left with a really interesting decision. I was thinking about it for a while because I think this is the type of player he would raise with ace queen, and I also double block king queen, which I think are probably the worst queen x's that he would try and go for some value on the river with. So
So like, before you say, because there's some interesting discussion going on in the chat, and I'm thinking about this. So again, you got about $1,000, right, up to the river. About, is that about right? Yeah, 250. Well, you made it 75, 155, 400. Yeah, just under $1,000. So you're just over a pot size bet. So obviously there's a couple of different options here. We talked about how I'm not a huge fan of checking. That's an option. There's an option of block, I guess you could say block betting. But again, like I don't even know how I could ever fold to a raise. Like, what am I going to give the guy? It's possible he could have pocket sevens too. That would be consistent with this, which is he's betting the flop because you check, then he has ace king. Now he picks up like a big hand. So I can see 7-7 and 4-4 are the viable ones. That's assuming that he raises pre with pocket queens, pocket nines. There's some chatter in the chat, and I can kind of get on board with this. Like, if you're not going to bet fold here, like if you don't think a block is in order, and you think, well, if I go half pot, I'm committed, I'm just not going to fold, there's just not that many combos, and you just want a max value, is there ever a case for just like shoving? Like, once you break a threshold where you're not going to bet fold, let's say that threshold is 400 or 500 here, like half your stack. If you just like shoved here for like 950, is this type of, like, are you going to get a fold from like queen, jack, king, queen, queen 10? Now, if you think shoving might get those hands to fold out, then it might be a mistake to fold. But I've seen some pretty wacky stuff here. It's an interesting sort of effective stack SPR scenario here, the way that you've played it. I wonder, because usually like, oh, for value, say you had the lead, okay, now you bet like maybe 600, something like that. Well, if you lead out for 600, you never bet folding. So does 600, if you say you're targeting queen 9, queen 10, queen jack, how often does 600 get called versus how often 950 gets called? If 950 gets called 60% of the time and 600 gets called 80% of the time, the 950 bet is better, if I did that out in my math correctly. So I just think that it's a very good card for you.
no, it is definitely a very good card, and I think just kind of with the way I played the hand, I think I'm actually probably the one that could end up with more draws than he does. Maybe we both could have draws pretty equally, but
Well, and then something else too. Mathemagical 55 also says if you think he has a draw though, and you think he'll bluff it, then obviously the play is to check. We don't know that though. Again, like, I mean, what's the draw? It's jack 10 is open ended or king jack. Of course, we block king jack, right? I mean, those are the viable draws. So, yeah, I mean, you have all options open to you. Check to induce. I'm not a huge fan because I think he's more sort of, I just think it's unlikely. The reason why I don't like checking into induce is because we don't know if he has a draw. His range could be queen X or a draw, or check to induce, or bet smaller as a block to guarantee a call. I guess I don't know how you bet fold. You could say block fold, bet like 2/3 to get a call, or shove. All these things are sort of open to you. Sorry, I've been talking a lot. So what were you thinking?
So I actually do decide to block bet, and I bet 100.
100?
Yep.
That was not the option. Uh,
I've screwed up this hand entirely. I know. I'm looking back at this and I'm shaking my head myself.
well, I mean, that is really a block bet. Hero bets 100. I mean, here's the thing. Again, I don't know what's going to happen here, but somehow if I found myself like this and you bet 100 and then you face a jam, I'm sorry, I just can't fold. It would be almost worse for me if I bet 350 and he jammed, because I feel like you're inducing a raise here. If you bet 100 and he jams, okay, like I guess more power to him. He's got pocket fours or pocket sevens. If you bet 100, might he even raise with queen nine here? I don't know. Okay, so you bet 100.
Yeah, and my thought process at the time was like I wanted him to kind of spaz out a little bit with some of obviously the hands that I beat. But yeah, so I'm not even kidding you, Bart. Within maybe 2 seconds, he slides his pumpkin chip in the middle and says all in.
Well, I mean, Brandon, you had said before that you were thinking about betting small to induce him. We talked about how if he raises pocket queens and pocket nines here pre-flop, which I think he does over the top of one limp, there's just so little value here. And now obviously late street raises are very strong in live poker, but the way that this one was set up and the way that you played it, I don't think I can fold here. And then you said you wanted to set up a bet to induce, right?
Yeah, but I also didn't like how quickly he did it too.
I can't fold here. I would not have taken the line as played, but there's just too little value here for me to fold here. I got to tell
Yeah,
you.
so I do tank for a little bit, but I end up calling.
So hero calls, and what's the reveal?
He has pocket fours.
Well, I mean, it is what it is. Whether he shut up a 4-4 or not, but I mean, there's some rivers that are going to be bad for you in the sense of being results oriented. That they just cut down on all the value. It's just chunks of the value, and this is one of them. I mean, it really is the one, because we talk about no top set, no middle set, only one combo of quads, and then queen nine gets counterfeit. So it's the worst card in the deck for you in this particular case. But the more important thing to take away from this hand, though, is, I mean, listen, you're destined to lose anyways, some portion of it, but we don't want to be results oriented. We want to play the hand in the best possible way. Thank you very much for the call, Brandon. I appreciate it.